We got cool jobs. We do cool things. Our work should be magical. Welcome to STEMdenity. I'm your host, Anna Hodshire. We work really hard and our jobs shouldn't suck. Let's dive in. It's graduation season, and whether you're still in school, you've just graduated, congrats, by the way, awesome. You left school recently, you've been out for a few years, you've been out for a very long time. I don't know about you guys, but for me, that school cadence has always stuck around. I feel the spring semester. I feel the August semester, or not August, but the fall semester when usually picks up around August. I'm all excited when summer semester rolls around, even though I still work full time. My brain's still like, it's summer, you can do things. But I'm like, sorry, brain, we're an adult. And I do take summer vacation, so it is more fun, but still. So graduation season always feels like graduation season to me. And what happens during graduation? Well, there's life transitions, there's parties, there's congratulations, and there's always some amount of advice floating around, right? Whether it's going to your commencement, your graduation ceremony, and there's 1, 2, 5 speakers giving advice, basically. It's floating around. And some advice out there is great, and some advice out there is fine. But I really like hearing advice, contemplating it, and then taking what works for me and leaving what doesn't. So this is what this episode is going to be. This is an advice episode. And it's not just me giving you advice, because that's boring. Let's hear advice from a variety of people and a variety of backgrounds, areas of life, walks of life. And this comes from earlier this semester, in April, my department, Systems Engineering at Colorado State University, held a systems engineering conference for the department. And this is because we have a lot of students online. We have over 300 students who are getting their master's or PhDs or doctorates of engineering in our online program, which means that while some of them live in Colorado, many of them live out of state, and many of them, you're only really interacting with them online. So this was a chance for anyone who wanted to come out to Colorado State University, Fort Collins, April, beautiful time of year, and meet each other. And it was so nice. I have been at conferences that have a variety of research topics like this one did, but usually conferences are like, you need to go sell your projects, your ideas. People are going to try to sell their products, projects, ideas to you. And it can be high pressure. It can feel like I need to walk away with, 10 new contacts of people that I could do a project with or something. None of this at this conference. This conference really, it was small enough, it was intimate enough that it just felt like, here's a chance to meet people, to know people who I already know better, and to meet a bunch of people who all have different backgrounds, all have different research interests, and just learn from each other. It was delightful. I loved it. And on the first day, the organizers of the conference pulled together an alumni panel from 3 people who have graduated from the program. Sarah Shaw, who is graduating just this semester with her PhD. Congrats, Sarah. Awesome. Art Villanueva, who graduated a few years ago with his doctorate in engineering, and Brian Johnston, who graduated over a decade ago with his master's. And as a part of the panel, there were some scripted questions and some open audience questions. And the last scripted question that the moderator gave the panel about 60 seconds to kind of think through what would they want to do was, what 3-word advice would you give our current students? Now, that advice was geared towards students, but again, just like I feel like I've never lost that school cadence, I've also never lost that I'm done learning. I'm not done learning. I'm always learning. I'm always bringing in new advice, incorporating what works, tossing what doesn't. So I really appreciated the chance to hear this advice, think about it in my own context, and figure out what did and didn't work for me. So without further ado, I reached out to each panelist, Sarah, Art, and Brian, and asked them if they would be so generous to record a quick memo of them giving their advice, giving a little background around the advice they all have. So let's listen to what they have to say.
Hi, my name is Sarah Shaw. I've spent over 20 years working in space systems engineering, operations, and program management, primarily supporting Department of Defense and intelligence community missions. My career started in the Air Force, where I worked on launch and satellite operations, and over time I moved into leading large engineering teams, managing complex space programs, and helping solve some pretty high-stakes technical challenges. Today, I'm a senior engineer with the Aerospace Corporation, where I focus on digital engineering and data integration. Alongside that, I've just completed my PhD in systems engineering at Colorado State University, where my research looks at how we help the workforce transition to model-based systems engineering. So not just the technology, but the people side of change. Because even in a field as technical as space systems, success really comes down to how people learn, communicate, and grow over time. So if I had to boil down my advice to students into just 3 words, it would be this: study, communicate, and persevere. First, study. This one is fairly self-explanatory. Actively engage with the material. Ask why things work the way they do. Go back to the concepts that don't make sense yet and work through them. In every phase of my career, from learning orbital mechanics to leading complex programs, the people who succeeded weren't necessarily the ones who picked things up the fastest, but the ones who built strong, consistent study habits. Second, communicate. This is one of the biggest differentiators I've seen, especially as problems get more complex. No one works in isolation. The ability to ask good questions, explain your thinking, admit when you don't understand something yet, and collaborate with others, that's what makes teams effective. And since education is a marathon, not a sprint, make sure you reach out to your professors or advisor. Use communication to keep yourself accountable and track your plans and progress. If you're having an issue, make sure your professors or advisor know. We're all human and life happens. Open communication is really key. And third, persevere. Because things will get hard. You'll hit classes or challenges that don't come easily. You'll have moments where you feel behind or unsure of yourself. I had plenty throughout my PhD research where I went from one day thinking, this idea is great, I think it could work, to thinking the very next day, this is the worst concept ever, I'm going to fail. Perseverance isn't about pushing through blindly. It's about continuing to move forward, adjusting your approach, and not letting setbacks stop you. So if you're a student listening and you're not sure if you're doing it, quote, right, or if you feel like everyone else has it figured out, you're not alone. You don't need a perfect plan. Focus on those 3 things: study, communicate, and persevere. It sounds simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Thanks for listening.
Hello, everybody. This is Art Villanueva. So 3 years ago, I finished and defended my doctoral dissertation. Of course, it was a huge relief, and sometimes people ask me how I actually got through something that big. The fact is, I didn't get through it with any sort of brilliance or perfect planning. I got through it with 3 words: declare, do, and report. So the first word is declare. I didn't treat my dissertation like a vague future goal. What I did was I told my advisor my timeline, and I told people I was working on it. Knowing that sometimes I procrastinate, as many of us do, saying something publicly changes your relationship to it. It becomes a commitment. It becomes a promise, and I don't break promises. I knew it was a kind of forcing function I needed to kick my ass into gear, and that decision anchored everything that followed. So the second word is do. When you look at a dissertation as a whole, it's overwhelming, it's too big, too complex. So I stopped thinking about finishing, as I do with a lot of things. Instead, I focused on doing something every day, or at least every week, that moved it forward. Some days that meant reading a single article. Some days it meant running an experiment. Some days it meant drafting a rough section that I knew I was going to rewrite. Some days it meant exploring an idea that ultimately didn't work. After all, research is experimentation. Experimentation means not everything succeeds. There are a lot of dead ends. Hours were spent pursuing questions that didn't make it to the final document. But here's what I learned. Every dead end is progress. Every failed experiment clarified something. Every attempt, successful or not, moved me forward. The key wasn't perfection. It was never perfection. It was consistency. I didn't need to conquer the entire mountain each day. I just needed to take one step. And that's where the third word mattered most: report. Every Friday, I reported to my advisor what I had worked on that week. Not what I meant to do, not what I planned to do, but what I actually did. That weekly report created the rhythm. Because I'll be honest, there were Thursdays when I realized I hadn't made any progress yet, and I had been busy, but not productive in the dissertation itself. And I knew I had to send that report, that update on Friday. So on Thursday, I did something. Maybe it was an hour of focused writing. Maybe it was organizing data. Maybe it was testing a small idea. It didn't have to be groundbreaking, but it was real. So accountability, simple, consistent reporting forced action. So those small Thursday efforts added up more than I realized at that time. Week by week, the work accumulated and eventually it was done. Looking back, finishing my dissertation wasn't about a dramatic breakthrough, it was about repetition. Declare, do, and report. Declare gave me the commitment, do gave me momentum through experimentation, and report gave me accountability. Big goals don't get completed in giant leaps. They get completed through small, consistent acts of discipline, especially in the days you don't feel like it. Not every week was extraordinary, but every week I did something and I told somebody about it. Declare, do, and report. That's how I got there.
Brian Johnston, thanks for hopping on for a couple minutes for your 3-word advice to students and not students. Do you want to quickly give us the background on who you are?
Sure. I'm Brian Johnston. I live in Fort Collins, Colorado. Uh, Professionally, I spent the first half of my life as a Navy helicopter pilot. And then I returned to school as an adult learner and got a master's in systems engineering from Colorado State. I did my research in transportation electrification. And then I Googled it and got a job building hybrids and electric trucks for about a decade. So that was what I've been up to lately. I kind of got the startup bug and went from building electric commercial trucks to autonomous forklifts. And I currently work at a startup incubator called Innosphere.
I'd like to point out 2 things. One is that for your younger listeners, it's actually shocking how much I Googled it and then I became the thing is actually how STEM careers go. That's how I went into atmospheric chemistry for my PhD and such. And the other is the nice pronunciation of Johnston. I don't know if many listeners will know this, but the Utah accent really drops all the T's out of the middle of words. So I'm always afraid to say a T when it shows up in the middle of the word in case it sounds weird. So, hunting, mountain, all these. So appreciate your pronunciation. But anyways, I digress.
Well, if you're named Johnston and you live in a world of Johnsons, then like when you look at my signature, the T is big.
It's like a larger font size than all the other.
It's like a John Hancock T in the middle.
It's your differentiator. I like it. All right. So you were on the panel for the alumni at the Systems Engineering Conference, and your advice was the most painful for me because I am terrible at this, but it was refined elevator pitch, your 3-word advice. And then you gave a nice explanation at the time, which I'm sure you don't necessarily remember what you said there. But I'd love for you to tell us why refined elevator pitch is great advice.
Well, I think that the key, and this is especially critical in engineering, but it's also, like important in your regular life, is that, we deal with a lot of complex subject matter and technologies, et cetera. But when you're standing at a cocktail party or you're at a family reunion, people often are, hey, hey, Brian, what do you do at work? And I think it's key to be able, and that's also the same for a CEO of a company, is for you to be able to quickly sort of summarize in 2 minutes or less what your project's about, what your technology is about, what a regional innovation engine for the NSF is about. And so I think it's and have that framed so that you can quickly describe to somebody what it is you do. And because then they know, oh, these are the kind of follow-on questions I want to ask.
Can you actually, so I've heard the advice, right? Give them, elevator pitch, elevator pitch. And beyond just practice it a lot, which, okay, that's fine. How do you actually come up with what your refined elevator pitch is?
Well, me personally, I come up with it with a story to use the first minute of the 2 minutes. For example, I was the lead systems engineer on an airplane for Lockheed Martin, and people would ask me, like, what does the lead systems engineer do? And, it's easy for me to say, the lead systems engineer coordinates all of the various engineering disciplines and makes sure that the final product is, that functions as advertised, etc. But what I normally do is tell this story. And the story is, one time there was a group of engineers working, aeronautical or aerospace engineers working on sending a spaceship to Mars. And one day they walked out to their car long after business hours, as normal, and they looked up and saw this giant full moon. And in the next morning meeting, they said, "Did anyone see that full moon? I hope that thing doesn't get in the way." And there was like this deer in the headlights look from the entire engineering team because no one had thought of it, for one. And as unlikely as that might be, it wasn't like a 0% chance, right? So when I describe what a systems engineer does, I say the systems engineer is the one that thinks of those things and make sure that we did consult with an astronomer and we did consult with the ballistics or the trajectory engineers, and that they all talk to each other. And then I bring that story back into, like, how does that explain what I did for Lockheed Martin, which was, I'm building an airplane that's, got a whole bunch of new sensors on it. And an aerodynamicist would say, that giant ray dome you're going to put on the front is awful. Like, I don't want to do that. And, the radar engineer says, that stupid tail fin that you put on the back of an airplane to make it fly straight gets in my way, and I don't get to optimize my thing. And I'm the one that sort of adjudicates those groups, so that in the end, the project meets the desired result.
Yeah, that's great. And then
Is
maybe
that in 2 minutes or less? Close.
The listeners should time that, go back, rewind, hit your stopwatch. I like that though. And I mean, 2 minutes is obviously the rule of thumb, but people give poster presentations all the time, and they love to just give these like 6, 8, 10-minute poster presentations when they're practicing. And I'm like, absolutely not. There's a poster hall. There's probably 100 posters in there if you're at a mid-sized conference even. And people are going to want to hang out and talk to you if they're really excited about your project. But if they're just kind of skimming through, you got to have like that 30-second, 1 minute, hey, this is why this work is interesting and matters, to, reel them in. So I like the story, it's catchy. It's a little less stressful than trying to hit 14 technical points in 90 seconds. So that's good. I like that.
I even like sort of bring that down to where, if I'm giving a presentation, I am very militant about not having more than 3 or 4 bullet points on a slide. And I will fill in the gap with the presentation. That's why I'm in front of it.
Yep.
Is to, like, these are your 4 takeaways, and I'm going to tell you a little mini story about each one of them. But if it's, how many times have we sat in a presentation where it said, oh, this is an eye chart, or, oh, this is well, I don't need those. I don't want those. The audience doesn't want those. Like, a nice picture, 4 bullets, and 2 sentences about each bullet is the way I frame like a presentation.
Yeah, we in our group, we just came up with a swear jar idea where we're gonna make students put in a very small amount of money every time they have graphs or text that aren't readable in their practice presentations. And then at the end of each semester, we'll throw a party, and if they hit a minimum limit, we'll double what was put into the swear jar. But
Right. For me, it reminds me of back when I was in the Navy. I had this commanding officer, and his signature line was faster and funnier. So if he was getting bored with your slide, or he was getting bored with your presentation, he would just say, faster and funnier, Johnston. And that was just sort of his prompt to, like, give me my takeaways. And I still say that today, or I'm like faster and funnier, Johnston. Like I can tell I'm losing the audience or whatever that is.
Well, there you go. There's our second 3-word advice. We got refined elevator pitch, bookended by faster and funnier. So,
Faster and funnier.
all
And
right. Well,
probably the last farewell was, what do you need done?
mhm.
As a question, because whenever I do respond always when someone asks me what I do to that with that.
Yeah. What do you need done? I like that because we don't really know. As you pointed out, we were talking before you hit record. You don't know who you're talking to necessarily, especially if you haven't met the person yet. So ask them what they need done. If they kind of give you that deer in headlights, well, they probably didn't have $500,000 to fund your cool idea anyway. So it's all right.
But sometimes they do.
Sometimes they do.
And, you know, I have even tailored some of my own personal career to that, which was when I asked our HR department, what's the hardest job you have to fill? They said functional safety engineer, right? Which is a real job. And there's training involved, et cetera. But I had taken that training to broker a deal with GM or whomever. And I said, well, I am that person. And I never got paid more for a job than that. Like I just said, oh, what do you need done? I need a functional safety engineer. And I'm like, I do that. So
Was that a casual, because people are trying to figure out how to get jobs all the time. Was that a more casual interaction or were you actually there for a job interview?
no, this was at the company where I was currently working.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my segue to my next job. I was already trained to do that. But now that like my current job is in workforce development, and every company that I meet with, I literally talk to the people about like, what's the hardest job you have to fill and how do you currently fill it? Here's an example of that. I went to talk to a company, they build stratospheric balloons, right? Aerospace stuff. And I said, what's the hardest job you have to fill? And they said, manufacturing technician. I'm like, well, how do you find those people? And they said, we get them from the furniture industry because those people can follow directions, make repeatable, products, and they can sew. Like, who would have thought of that? Like when I was gonna like try to build a pipeline to that job or that whole series of jobs, or sell that job to, a K through 12 system of, workforce development, who would have thought that like if you want to be a space technician that you would learn how to sew and work in furniture, right? So for me, that's how I gather the information of how to build the pipeline from kindergarten to the jobs is oftentimes like, well, what do you do now? And, another company was like, oh yeah, I build these advanced weather sensing equipment. And I said, well, what's the hardest job to get? And they said, manufacturing technician, et cetera. And I'm like, well, where do you get those people now? And the answer was the Navy, because they follow the rules, they make repeatable wire crimps, and they know how to read a schematic. And that's how, for me, I gather like, what should the pipeline look like? Because oftentimes industry is very off the mark with what uh, workforce development people are trying to put together or what they think is the right thing. My personal experience in the EV business was when people would walk up to us and say, oh, what you need is electricians and electrical engineers. And yeah, we need like 2 of those each. But what we really need are people that can make repeatable wire harnesses. And they don't even need to be trained in high voltage because the thing doesn't go to high voltage until it's done. So really it was like a different mindset where people would think, oh, you need, like I said, a PhD in, electrical design to build EVs. No, what you really need is somebody that can make wire harnesses that always work.
And I have to imagine, to bring this full circle for all this workforce development that you're doing right now, you have to do a lot of little mini refined elevator pitches to explain to people, you think you need, as you just said, you think you need this PhD in electrical engineering or something, but no, this is what you need and why you need it. And you're convincing them in less than 2 minutes without making them feel stupid or not heard, right? You're just kind of trying to bring them all to the same vision at the same table.
Right. And some of that, leverages on the experience of being gone from 10-person startup to public company, you know, learn from the school of hard knocks. But like the classic example is there's not a startup in the world that thinks about what customer service should look like. And they'll deploy their technology wherever they can for whoever will pay for it. But like in the back of their head, and this is one of the things that Innosphere does, is we help coach people to think about that.
Mm.
But to your point, I would tailor an elevator pitch to a startup CEO to how are you thinking about scale, or how are you thinking about, customer service, or are you limiting your customer base because you can't support with 2 people and plane tickets a thing around the world.
Yep. I worked in like a 6-month startup position. The startup is still around, but in customer success. And it was such a different world for me, but I really feel like it was very valuable to put myself in that, okay, well, what do our customers need? How can we be helpful? And also listen to what they're saying, because that's one of your pipelines for your next product development. And if nothing else, I walked away, and every single time I interact with someone through some help thing for, my subscription for my water filter or whatever, I'm like, you are a person, and I know the email thing that you're using, and it's difficult, and I appreciate your time, and I know you have too many tickets, and thank you for working with me because I'm very confused right now.
Of course, you can steer that the other way too, which is, I have somebody's EV, and occasionally they're like, oh, your airbag system is malfunctioning, can you wait a week? And I'm like, no. Like, can you give me a loaner? Like, I'm putting my family in this car. So I'm glad for you to appreciate how hard it is, because I did run that division at Lightning, and it's hard, especially in the early startup days, because your things break often.
Yeah.
And experimenting on the customer it's a model, but you got to have the right kind of customers if you're going to do that.
Yeah, it's risky. All right. Well, I know that you are rapidly careening towards retirement. Congratulations.
End of next week.
End of next week. That's insane. And I'm sure you don't seem like a person who's going to just relax quietly. So I can't wait.
You'll see me around.
Yeah.
I won't be working in an official capacity anymore, but you'll see me around. And I continue to live in Old Town Fort Collins and whatever. So you certainly have access to me for whatever you need. And I'm super interested in, I'm sort of putting together some Lightning alumni to help mentor the EV racing team and do some other side projects. So I'm available.
Perfect. Awesome. That was really nice. I enjoyed that. I feel like they all were similar and yet worded differently enough that there's pieces in there that might work perfectly for you. So to just recap, Sarah had study, communicate, and persevere. Art had declare, do, and report. And Brian had refined elevator pitch. And I'll note that when I reached out to each panelist, I said, this is the 3-word advice that I wrote down that you said, but you're welcome to refine or update this, since, obviously not everyone thinks great on their feet in the first 60 seconds in front of a lot of people. Now, all of these original advice were fantastic, so they did think great on their feet, not trying to imply that, but sometimes with the gift of time you come up with something even better. And Art did come up with something that I feel was actually better. His original advice was plan, execute, and measure, which is still excellent advice, but I really like declare, do, and report. It's simple. It feels very applicable across several areas of life. And when this question was asked to the panelists and they had about 60 seconds to think about it, I in the audience was like, I wonder what my 3-word advice would be. And I came up with my 3-word advice, and it's from this semester, and I have an episode recorded on it. I'll link it in the show notes, and it's observe, reflect, articulate. I learned observe, reflect, articulate from our department head when we were co-teaching a class together, and he was teaching on research methods. How do you even do research? Well, it's this process of a cyclic process of observing, reflecting, and articulating. And I love this for a lot of reasons. One, it's not just for work. It also works really well in life. And for the purpose of today, it also really blends in nicely with the other advice we've gotten. Sarah has study, communicate, and persevere. Well, study is observing and reflecting. Communicating is articulating. And persevere is like, yeah, don't give up. That's the cherry on the top. If you give up, then it doesn't really matter that you observed, reflected, and articulated once. That needs to be a cycle that you continue over and over and over again. Art gave us declare, do, and report. These all feel like observing, reflecting, articulating activities to me. And Brian gave us refined elevator pitch, which you can't come up with a good refined elevator pitch until you've done your observations. Okay, what is the status of the field? Or what is the status of my competition if I'm trying to sell an idea or a product, right? And then you have to reflect through things, and then you articulate and you start to make your elevator pitch through articulation, and then you refine it and you refine it again and you refine it again. And in fact, you should always be treating all of this advice, in my perspective, as a cycle. All of these things are just rinse and repeat. They're not linear. Sometimes you jump from observations to articulations and you realize you forgot to reflect. So you got to go back to the middle and do some reflections. New information comes in. Something goes on sale. Someone else writes that paper you're going to write, and you need to refine your elevator pitch, or you need to persevere through the challenge, or you need to declare that you're going to do the next step because, you're feeling a little stuck right now. I also, after thinking about it even more, I have a second set of 3-word advice waiting in the wings, but I'm not going to give it to you today. 4 sets of advice is enough. And I have an episode coming out on it next month. Acronym NMS for the advice. So that's N as in no thank you, M as in mother, and S as in snake. So NMS, look for it next month. It's also great advice, but I think we already have some really nice advice to chew on for the week and for the month. And why am I pulling together this episode? I don't want to just feed smack you with a bunch of advice, but as I alluded to in the beginning, I feel like sometimes advice hits just right. You hear it and you're like, bam, that is what I needed. Perfect. And sometimes it hits close by and you have to work a little to make it your own, or you have to kind of pull out the things you like. So I don't know, I'm not you, but maybe you're just going to pull out one word from everybody and you're like, study, execute, articulate, pitch. Perfect. I don't know. Maybe that makes perfect sense to you. Maybe it makes no sense to you. Nothing really works until it works for you. And that brings me to the learn and move your feet for the week. So learn and move your feet, as always, is heard a lot of things. We've thought about a lot of things. What's the takeaway that you could go and execute on this week to try to just, nudge yourself even 1 degree closer in the direction that you want to be going in? So I'm not going to say, you might be expecting me to be like, choose your favorite advice or come up with the combo pack from this advice that works for you. Nope. I am going to encourage you instead to consider, what 3-word advice would you give people around you? Doesn't matter if you're in school. It doesn't matter if you're about to graduate. You have experience, you have thoughts, you have the ability to give other people excellent advice, and that excellent advice really needs to hit home to you. So not only am I going to ask you, come up with your own 3-word advice, and if you loved one of these, take it and run with it. Awesome. But if you didn't quite love them, or you feel like you have a different perspective, take that and run with it. The next little step on that is, do you feel like you follow your 3-word advice? And are there some areas in your life that might be slightly lacking in that advice, right? Maybe, okay, mine's observe, reflect, articulate. I can be quite honest that something I'm working on with in my life right now is interpersonal relationships, especially when they get sticky, especially when there's conflict. I hate conflict. I will avoid it like the plague. And it's really easy in conflict to jump right to articulate, right? Someone comes up to you and they have, they say something and you're like, well, I'm going to defend myself. I'm going to poorly articulate this next comment, and it's not going to go well because I did not take the time to observe, reflect, articulate. Let's take a toy example of, let's say I have a neighbor, and this isn't real, but let's say I have a neighbor who has a dog and that comes out every night at 10 p.m. and barks its little head off at something, who even knows what. And I go to bed at 9:30 and I'm like, this dog every single night, I'm about to fall asleep and bark, 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 bark. okay, well, I could just stomp over to my neighbors and say, your dog barks at 10 p.m. every night, and I'm trying to fall asleep, and it's really frustrating, and it's so disrespectful. And then, right? Okay, well, that's going to be pretty challenging to get that relationship back on track to where I want it to be, which is I want to live where I'm living for a very long period of time, and I want to have, if not a overly friendly, at least civil relationship with all of my neighbors. Okay. All right. So maybe I need to step back and I need to do some observations. All right. Observe. The dog appears to come out at 10 p.m. every single night and bark. Is that true? Does it every single night or is it most nights? Okay. All right. You know what? It didn't bark Thursday and it didn't bark Saturday. All right. So it's not every night. So I don't need to be dramatic and be like, every single night your dog is barking. Okay. All right. Observations. The dog comes out and barks several nights of the week and I do wake up. Those are the facts from my perspective. Reflecting upon these facts, okay, it's pretty annoying because I am going to bed before the dog comes out. I guess if the dog came out at 9, would I be as annoyed? I guess not. Like, it's kind of annoying to have a barking dog no matter what, but whatever, 9 p.m., it's all good. I'm brushing my teeth then. Maybe it's my cue to start getting ready for bed. I guess I wouldn't mind that much. And so I walk over to my neighbor and I say, hey, neighbor, I've got some observations. You know, your dog seems to come out around 10 every night and bark. And the neighbor might, you know, who knows how the neighbor's going to respond. They might already be on the defensive. They may, because they're expecting a conflict, right? Or they might just sort of be like, yeah, so, and okay, next step. Like I tend to go to bed a little bit earlier than that. And the dog usually wakes me up as I'm falling asleep. I'm wondering if there's maybe some ideas we can kick around together on helping your dog not bark so much. All right, now you've kind of made this a collaboratory thing. Hey, possibly your neighbor hates the fact that their dog is barking all the time. Like, all right, now you've opened some doors. Maybe it's not going that way at all. Maybe it's going really poorly, but all right, this is just a scenario. If your neighbor seems open to it, you know, you can toss around some ideas like, have you tried a bark collar? Do you know what your dog is barking about? Right? All these things kind of reflecting back and forth and gently articulating a path forward, and then near the end of the conversation try to come up through again clear articulation, what could be a possible path forward. Maybe your neighbor is willing to consider a bark collar. They've never tried it before. You're like, cool, my dogs were barkers and I found these collars, $15 on Amazon. They work really well. They're pretty waterproof. If they fall apart, it was $15. You get another one, all right. So now you've kind of got this path forward. So that's where in my life, interpersonal relationships, I'm struggling. And I definitely can use that observe, reflect, articulate, because where I get in trouble is when I jump right to articulation and I poorly articulate and things get worse. Where things go well is where I take that time to, all right, what am I observing in this behavior between myself and this other person? What can I reflect on where maybe I could do better? Where maybe I could suggest they can meet me in the middle, and then cleanly articulating that. And this brings us to the end of the episode where, of course, as usual, this is not affiliated with my research and teaching roles at Colorado State University, but it's part of my belief that we can all have jobs we love. And as a part of that, good advice really helps, right? We're not just all living in a vacuum trying our best. We can learn from each other. And I'm sure that you've had advice that you've hated in your life. And if you have, that takes us to my favorite part of the episode, which is the song of the week. I love music. Music keeps me going throughout all of my days. And, you get bad advice. You're like, oh, this advice is so bad. I'm thinking of some advice right now that I don't even say that it's so foul. It's around diet culture and women. And it's awful. So terrible advice. And you know what's good revenge for bad advice? Dancing. And you know what's a fun song? Dancing is the Best Revenge by ! And Leah Leah. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing any of those band names right. It really is 3 exclamation points in a row, like in tarot bangs, if you want to be fancy, the punctuation mark, not spelling it out, exclamation point, but link is in the show notes. So if you're confused, go find it. Music by XSS. You can hang out with me on Instagram at STEMdentity or LinkedIn at Anna Hodgshire. Feel free to share your 3-word advice. If I get enough people sharing their 3-word advice, I'll totally make another episode on this. Like, let's make it a community thing. We all have good advice that can help each other. Let's do it. You know how the world works. It's algorithm based. So if you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend, subscribe on your podcast app, leave a review, all that good stuff. I really appreciate you listening, and I can't wait to talk to you next week.